You can't turn on the news without hearing about how inflation is up, and certainly people are feeling frustrated about the state of the economy, the state of Biden's first term. He made many promises and doesn't really seem to be coming through on them. Well, the Biden White House thinks that this is unfair and you need to change your tune a little bit. So they've dispatched Ron Klain as well as some new advertisements to try to convince you that things are actually going a little bit better, turn those polls around. First, here is the White House Chief of Staff.
There's a lot of talk about how the economy is doing. Here are a few key facts that show the economy is growing and recovering under President Biden. Last week, the government reported that the unemployment rate's down to 4.2%. That's 3 years faster than experts predicted it would happen before we passed the rescue plan back in March. How many jobs? We've created 6 million jobs this year. That's more than any president in history has created in his first year in office. One reason we've created so many jobs, last year at this time, no Americans were fully vaccinated. Today, over 70% of all adults in this country are fully vaccinated. Getting America vaccinated is getting America back to work. A year ago, there were over 21 million people on unemployment. Today, that number's down to just over 2 million. Amazing progress in a year. And the recovery goes beyond jobs. Look at this chart on retail sales, up $90 billion since last year. That's an economy that's humming.
Okay, that is an economy that's humming. It's not just humming, it's also clapping, and I think it's tap dancing, actually. The economy is doing a lot of moving and making a lot of noise. So there were a lot of noises there, a lot of facts there. And I think we all know that nothing changes the mind of the American people than a politician standing next to charts that they're moving through. But he brought up a couple of good points. Let's start with you, Nina. What did you think about that? Is this going to get through to people? Do you think that that was a fair assessment of their performance in this first year of Biden's term?
We're not going to argue the numbers, John, but if you ask me, is that going to get through to the people? Hell no. First
there was
of all,
music.
Don't just tell me. I gotta feel it. There was nothing there, and my question would be: is humming for whom becomes the question. We know that within this economy, the people who are reaping the biggest benefit is certainly the people who always reap the biggest benefit, and that is the ultra wealthy. When you have to pay more for gas, when you have jobs that you got to fight to just get a living wage, when there's nowhere in this country where minimum wage where somebody who's being paid minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Houston, or let me just say DC, we have a problem. And my last point, pandemic.
Francesca?
I mean, I have to say, as someone who's been like really wondering why the Biden administration hasn't been singing their own victories and really trying to talk about the wins in the face of bad polling, et cetera. I'm like A for effort, but like D+ for execution. I think this is that like everyone trying to bite off Bernie Sanders style, where it's like all we got to do is be straightforward and have a little flip chart. And it's like, yeah, Bernie does that because he's like, that's why we have to tax billionaires out of existence. Like it's good because it's actually real, but
it's him.
Exactly, and it's Bernie, and he's like a legit grump. Whereas like Ron Klain being like, this is Robert Reich, but not as good, but and like worse animations. Like get Olivia Rodriguez in there, or even better, screw the celebrities, get an actual worker, get someone who was able to stay afloat, who was able to go back to work, who got vaccinated, who feels safe. Let's talk to real people. You don't have to completely gussy it up and make it, super slick. Real people exist and they're out there. Talk to them.
Yeah, and then I think you could also, maybe you could appeal to Nina there a little bit by, sure, run through your numbers, and that's true, and those are good. We do have more vaccination, although when you compare the numbers now to the numbers a year ago, literally everyone in the room I'm in right now said, but there was no vaccine last year, so that's obviously dishonest. You could still talk about the numbers, but be clear about it and be truthful about it. And so talk about all of what you've done, but you also have to acknowledge all of what remains to be done. And if you do that, then you can talk about those who are standing in the way of some of the aid. That's certainly true. You can point out the Republicans in the Senate. You should also probably cast a little bit of a light on some of the Democratic senators that are making it so difficult to actually accomplish anything. But then you would probably also have to acknowledge that, look, if people are suffering, you could make a chart out of like student loan debt. The bar would be really high. It could be lower. I wonder who's stopping it from getting lower. So, yeah. And that's why they're not really answering all of the concerns. A few of the macroeconomic concerns are there, but not really getting down into the granular experience of people, working people's lives that, Nina, that you were talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, John, I mean, you really do have to feel it. And as we are saying, the numbers are exactly what they are. We get it. Okay, got that checked off the box, but that in and of itself is not going to move the people who are suffering the most. They need to feel it. And to the extent that they are not feeling it, John, to your point, it is a much better story to tell, to say, but I still get, even with all of these gains, I am working as hard as I can, and I'm gonna continue to work even harder because I know that some of you are not feeling this at all. This is why I want to tax the ultra wealthy. This is why I want to get more shots in arms. This is why I want to, save the environment. I mean, that's the kind of stuff they just, come on, tell the truth now.
Yes, this is why we need to pass the Build Back Better Act, right? It feels like an explainer video directed at like only the New York Times editorial board. Like it's like just for op-ed writers of the Washington Post and nobody else. Like why? So it's and you're totally right. Like it doesn't lay blame at the feet of Republicans for stalling and yet claiming victory on, let's say, the American Rescue Plan, right? That's and trying to tout that around. It again, and look, I don't mean, reducing yourself to Trumpian tactics, but man, when it's a win, it's a win. And when you've got adversaries working against the American people, you got adversaries working against the American people. And yes, Democrats have a lot of that blame, but like you're doing a political propaganda ad, man. Like talk about who's actually in the way.
Yes.
That's a great point.
That's it. Call them out.
What's that?
Name them. Call them out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's not their style in the Biden White House. Barely naming and calling out the Republicans, let alone the Democrats. And I also want to acknowledge.
Unless they're progressive.
Right.
Unless they're progressive, then they get called out and shamed.
That's true.
And everything.
You do, yes, you do certainly see that. They definitely, it is a difficult task to I don't know, to communicate about this. Like there's no, like I'm thinking, okay, how did Trump and the Republicans back when he was in charge, how did they communicate with their base? They never had to do a version of this because they didn't get into office with anything having to do with the economy. They never had a plan to improve people's lives, so they never were actually called to answer for it. It's really one of the benefits of the modern day Republican Party. They get put into office to stop kids from reading about like Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever. That's it, to protect Dr. Seuss. There's no expectation that there's gonna be more jobs, so when jobs don't come and wages don't go up, they never really promised those things anyway. I never saw Trump having to give like a desperate press conference to get through to them or dispatch Steve Bannon or something with charts about jobs because that's so, like the gap between what they were elected to do and the expectations for them, it has nothing to do with it. So, but it's not impossible. Bernie Sanders does do stuff like that. I think Katie Porter does, get through in these sorts of things. So it's not impossible if you have the right people on your side.
Yeah, but it's very natural for them. And I'm gonna push back a little bit. Difficult, when you're the president of the United States of America, when you have the privilege to work in this cabinet, when you have the privilege to be on his team, difficult is not being able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment on minimum wage. Difficult is not having paid family leave. Difficult is not having Medicare for all. Difficult is not knowing where your next meal is gonna come from. Difficult is trying to make $1 out of 15 cents because gas prices are so damn high that you can't afford to fill up your tank. That's difficult. Difficult is knowing that the moratorium on student loan repayments might go away. That's difficult.
Nina,
they don't live in difficult.
I'm gonna have to push back against you. I feel worse for Ron Klain. I'm kidding. Anyway, you're 100% right, obviously. Let's go to one more video though. So this is the Democrats organized Twitter account. So they wanted to get something social going. And so you're gonna see the job growth there. Man, that does not make George W. look very good. Okay, so look, I don't know, maybe I'm just an ass. Sure, those numbers are true, but you're also coming out of most of the pandemic. So I don't like when presidents try to take too much unilateral credit for major moves in the economy. And I also don't generally think it makes much sense to blame them too much for large scale moves in the economy. It's just sort of a game that they play, where I think the media's time and people's attention would be better spent are in direct areas where they've made promises and that they have power. Like if you want to give him some credit for, the stimulus that they did at the beginning of the year, I think that makes sense. They did that. You could also justifiably criticize him for cutting it in half, basically at the last minute. You could give them credit for doing the child tax credit, or you could criticize them for seemingly being ready in about a month or 2 weeks at this point to see it lapse. And you can certainly criticize him for not unilaterally doing what he said he would do on student loan debt. So they like to zoom way out into an area where trying to link the president to the economy in either direction feels really unfair, but that also conveniently absolves them of the areas where they can have a direct impact.
100%, and also it is without context, which is exactly what you're saying. It's like within the context of that job creation, it isn't really fair to compare it to other presidents, but also your context is unprecedented and unique in that you inherited a pandemic that had killed 500,000 people at that time, and a president who was sowing disbelief and doubt in a vaccine, in the COVID-19 virus in and of itself, who may or may not have had COVID when he debated you on stage. And you've got nothing to say to that. You can't say, and you're not even claiming, again, something that handed to you, that the former president has blood on his hands, that you're taking the pandemic seriously. You're taking the economic impact of the pandemic seriously. Instead, it is a without context graph, again, designed for like, I don't know, Thomas Friedman to be like, no, I guess there's jobs. I'll write a positive op-ed and whatever he does, and you're not actually speaking to what is on all of our minds, which is how are we going into the future? We almost lost our democracy and our livelihoods and our lives, right? So what is the future of public health care? What does that look like, given that our country has been so unprepared, so clearly unprepared for something like a pandemic?
Yeah.
Right? Answer these questions. Instead, it's like, oh, hey, look, I patched up the hole in this Titanic. And you're like, I guess.
That's a start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, you referenced some of what has come out recently about their plans to just dispense with the last vestiges of democracy. We will be talking about that in the second hour of the Young Turks. So there will be a little bit of that. Nina, any final comments on their attempt to reshape public opinion around the performance of the economy?
They need to do it better. Let's send out the messengers that really can get the message out, and then it's what we all three of us have been saying. They really have to acknowledge that pain is still there, but they're trying their hardest to make progress that people can feel. You got to give them something they can feel.
I want to ask one final quick question. So I always am curious about areas where I have blind spot or I exist in a big bubble, and I feel like both of you are both willing to and might delight in pointing out my naivete. So it feels like if you were to make a list of the 5 or maybe even 10 best communicators on the Democratic side, I feel like all of them are progressives that they don't really want to have anything to do with.
Yes.
Is that unfair? Yeah, or like people really like fired up by Amy Klobuchar speeches and things like that?
Wow, whoa.
That's cold, that's cold.
She tells good speeches about the snow occasionally, she does.
No. You're right. No, they're all on the best communicators are on the progressive side, because they really communicate from an area, I think, of passion, compassion, and lived experience. And the best people to tell those types of stories, like a Congresswoman Cori Bush, for example, who was homeless, who had to sleep in their car, who understands domestic violence by lived experience, all of those things. Those tend to be the better messengers, those people who are still connected to a lived experience that is not just one of being in wine caves with wealthy people.
Well, you don't like the Nancy and Chuck sort of like side by sides and just like sort of competing on who is like paler and staler, as they sort of do a duo act. I love it.
I want a
Ice cream
t-shirt.
in your freezer,
Oh God, yeah.
That mark.
We got to get the pale and stale 2024 shirts going.
Pale and stale. You're right. Like, I just want to say this is a week, obviously, where you saw the squad come out and very, in a robust way, defend Representative Ilhan Omar and condemn Lauren Boebert's Islamophobic comments. And every time I see Representative Ayanna Pressley speak, I am like, that's presidential. Like, she just has this gravitas that is like unmatched. And so yeah, I mean, and they're all effective communicators in different ways. But like Ayanna Pressley, and it's not just, it's more than how you present yourself, it's more than how you talk. But honestly, the way she talks and presents herself is just like, damn, like
it's the spirit, Francesca. I mean, you're tapping into, it's a spirit that they're not just doing this to do it. They actually have an emotional connection to what they are putting down.
Yeah.
And that is what was missing in what the chief of staff did. It was this, oh my God, we got to get out here and enumerate for the people all the great things that we're doing. And it's just check the box, versus people coming up there saying, hey, this is what it is. This is what we're standing up for. This is why I'm standing up for this. This is why we are fighting. And this is where we are going.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.